All right, we're brewing up another virtual coffee break. Here with the coaches, myself, I'm Aaron with Randy and Nick this morning. Hey. I've had that song. It's felt like school all morning long. I'm just a Bill. Yeah, I'm only a Bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. So regardless of how you feel.
Aaron, where did that come from?
Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
I was a good student if there was music and cartoons. That's real. I'm sorry. Maybe a little too real for this morning. Now, listen, this morning it is a live presentation. Unlike our podcast, although the studio is going to look familiar, if you haven't checked out our podcast, I would love to encourage you to do that. That's Coffee with Your Retirement Coach. It's on YouTube, anywhere where you enjoyed podcasts. Best way to get hit with that and not miss anything is to subscribe. So with just like that, I want you to dial in. Nick, there's a big bill.
Hey, there's a big bill. As a matter of fact, there's one big beautiful bill act. Oh my gosh. I mean, the creativity of the naming of this big beautiful bill is just outstanding.
The incredible arrogance.
Outstanding. You know, Aaron, I'm really excited to be doing this today because there is so much going on. And Randy, I mean, I know we were talking before we went live. I mean, the talking heads are just trying to engage with fear, get people really ramped up, excited, and all these things. But we've got to bring some normalcy back. We've got to actually come back to what is actually happening. And I'm excited about today's conversation. We're going to dive into this one big beautiful bill. Yeah. It's like a tongue twister. We're going to walk through what that looks like from Congress. But then before we get to that, you know, today we're also going to talk a bit more about what's going on with the economy and one of our concerns, which is really around the deficit, which, you know, the debt of this country is increasing and it doesn't seem like it matters. Republicans, Democrats, it just doesn't matter. So before we dive in, for our audience, want to let you guys know that this is politician agnostic. We don't care what your politics are. Today, we are talking about the math. We're just purely talking about what is actually happening, cutting through all the garbage and just getting to the point. And recently, Randy, we were talking, and I really, really liked how you framed how a lot of our deficit in our population and you use this example with real estate and equity in real estate. And I thought it was really helpful to kind of explain where we're at as a country today. Can you walk us through some of that thinking?
Yeah, you know, so it's interesting. I was watching one of the financial channels the other day, and they were talking about how much equity is built back up into housing and how people are tapping into their home equity, even with these rates being so high, and what they're doing with the equity and all that. And I got to thinking about, I wonder how much equity we really have in our real estate. Like what does the average homeowner have in terms of equity, and what does that look like? And then I started thinking about those numbers, and I was thinking about how much debt we have. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of times as you get closer to retirement, you want to pay off your home, you want to pay off your debt, you want to be debt free. That way, you know, your cash flow is more effective. But a lot of us don't realize how much debt we really are holding. So I thought I did a little research, and I thought I would just share some of these numbers to try to take all of this, you know, when you start throwing away millions and billions and trillions.
It's hard to put your arms around it.
It's just
have you ever tried to hug $1 trillion? It's hard.
All right, don't get I would try. I got long arms. Sorry, Randy.
I can't do it. I just can't do it. So anyway, I wanted to frame this along the lines of understanding the national debt and home equity, because everybody understands how much equity you have in your home. Like if you bought a home for $200,000, it's now worth $400,000, and you still carry a $200,000 mortgage, you got $200,000 worth of equity. See how I did that math? I kept it really easy. All right. So here's the amount of national debt that we have right now. It's really more than this, but at the time I did this, it was 36.2 trillion. I don't know how many trillions you've got at your house, but so that's a lot of money.
A little short.
But, so let's put it in perspective. And I thought, how could I put that in perspective? So what you're going to commonly hear the media say, and I'm not picking on the media, this is the language that is used. It's really kind of faulty in the thinking. And it says that the average American, man, woman, and child, has between 106 and 108 million, $1,000 worth of debt. If you did that ratio to the national debt, that's how much debt we all have.
Is that per citizen is what you're saying?
Well, don't do the citizen thing.
per person in the United States right now.
That's a whole nother.
We're not
All right.
getting political.
All right,
So
but
here's the deal.
Yeah, break that down.
All right, here's the deal. So there's a couple of things happening. One is, the idea of, we saw this many times in my lifetime where people build up equity in their home and then they borrow against it and then they get upside down. And then we have things like financial crisis or personal life crisis.
Yeah.
So right now we're adding about, on average, 1.5 trillion per year in deficit. So let me just walk through a couple of things here. I thought this was pretty cool. So total home owner equity. United States right now, about 65% of our population owns a home, about 48 million families, okay? And the total equity, if you took all of the homes that we own, citizens in the United States, it's 34.7 trillion. So that means we actually have less equity in our homes, all of us together, than what we have in national debt. We actually have a bigger mortgage in national debt than we have in equity on our homes.
And that ratio,
so we're upside down.
Yeah, that ratio is continuing to get worse because home prices are coming down and our deficit's going up.
So average home equity, this was a bigger number than I thought, is $311,000. Okay. 48% of the homeowners are equity rich. And when they say equity rich, this means that they owe less than 50% of the value of their home. So now let me do this. I don't want to take the whole coffee break with this, but debt versus home equity comparison. And then I want to put this in perspective of why this might not be solved anytime soon. Okay. First of all, the debt exceeds the homeowner equity. So 36 trillion debt versus 34 trillion in equity, home equity.
So our national debt.
Yeah. So the average per citizen, if we looked at the debt as a mortgage, which is basically is $106,000 to $108,000 per person.
Okay.
But that's not how it works. Okay. So home equity, we have $311,000 on average. That's the equity that people have in a home, those that own a home. So how do we put this in perspective? So I thought, you know what? Everybody doesn't pay the same amount of taxes. So we're throwing this number out like everybody has, like children aren't paying taxes, so this is not politically correct stuff. This is just math, as you said, Nick. So 50% of our population, 50% of our population pays 3% in federal taxes, or of the federal tax bill.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
The top 10%, and I think that's like at $160,000 worth of annual income. The top 60% pays 74% of all the federal taxes. So
say that again.
So the top 10% pays 74% of the federal taxes. So let's do this like equity and ratios, et cetera. So per citizen, it's 106, 108,000. Per taxpayer, it's 290,000. Because children aren't paying taxes. A lot of people are not paying taxes. So per taxpayer, it is 290,000 per person.
Yeah.
And then if we did it like the top 10%, what amount of that debt would they own if everything is like everybody's paying tax in the same ratio? Taxpayer, on average, the top 10%, $1.58 million per person.
Wow.
So your debt, like you've got your home paid for and all that, but really, here I think is the key is, if you're looking at this in a ratio of who pays for these burdens, right, wrong, indifferent, doesn't matter, just the math, if you're in the top 10%, the debt I would assign to you is about almost $1.6 million.
So just in a nutshell, because I love this, and like you said, this is a context that we're not getting. Oftentimes the reporting is like in a per capita across the board, but not everybody is ultimately responsible for this debt.
Right. I would say, what's been interesting to me throughout the years is how much tax people think they're paying when they aren't paying any taxes, or they're paying very little taxes. So what's the point of this? There's a couple of things I want to think about before we go through the bill, and that's where some of these challenges are going to be from the House versus the Senate, and where they're going to run into roadblocks, okay? So when you have a scenario where the top part of the population pays the majority of the taxes, but everybody votes, then that means it's going to be very difficult ever to have something change about this. Because if you start talking about cutting benefits in any area, then you don't care for the citizens. You don't care for the poor. You don't care for the elderly. If you talk about Social Security, you'll never be elected.
Yeah.
If you start cutting Medicare, you're not going to get elected. So you have to kind of go along to get along. And that means you have to be financially irresponsible to get elected. By the way that we're set up today. So this is.
And I know you're a little cynical here, Randy, but at the same time, I think there is a lot of truth to what you're saying. But I think there's a lot of politicians that go to Washington with really, really great intent to make a change, a difference, be prudent and fiscally responsible. But our system tends to just corrupt.
Well, I was going to say the problem with it, and we can't go into all that aspect. We don't want to get into the politics of it. But if you are really trying to be a good steward, and you might go into office really, like you said, totally ethical and all that, the system just beats you up. You just realize that you're fighting a beast that you just can't win.
Yeah.
And if you get in there and you fight like heck, you just won't be elected the next time. So again, it's sad, but let's put that aside and say, here's what we can do.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. So if I'm a citizen, right, and I find myself in those crosshairs that you're talking about, and my vote is going to be outweighed by people that don't carry the burden, and things are going to affect them, what can that person do, or what should that person be doing?
I think that here's the key.
Okay.
If you know your way around, and to get to a major city, there's a toll road, but you know that city pretty well, and you drive around the toll road taking side streets and that, and you don't pay the toll, there's nothing immoral, unethical about that.
Yeah.
But you have to know.
Right.
So really part of what this is, most people don't understand taxes very well. They don't understand how taxes affect them. They don't know how to, and I don't mean this derogatorily, but they don't know how to read a tax return. Their financial advisor's not looking at their tax return.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is, if you'll take the long road, because this isn't solved anytime soon, but if you'll modify how you hold assets and the kind of assets you hold so they're more tax efficient, then you're going to pay less toll. And it doesn't mean you're immoral. The things that are put in place are designed with purpose. So if you know your way around and you can reduce your tax burden over the long haul by making incremental changes in the kind of assets you own and diversifying your tax picture, then that burden, which today for many of our clients might be equivalent to almost $1.6 million per person, you can chip away at that just like you'd pay your home off early, but you've got to know how to do that. So I think really what I challenge us as a firm is to continue to educate our clients so that, well, this might be true, this math might be true, and I may be framing it in such a way that in my mind is more legitimate to what's really going on. You have to take action and do things in order to not be just prey and victim to this.
And we talk a lot about knowledge is power, and a knowledgeable client is our best client. Like we want them to be informed because it gives them more confidence to stay the course and stick with the plan, right, Aaron? Stick with the plan.
Stick with the plan.
All right. But, just real quick, I do think about there's a judge, and he had a fabulous name. His name was Learned Hand, right? Justice Learned Hand. And he says, paying more taxes than what you owe does not make you more patriotic. And I think, most of the time when people get into a situation where they're paying more tax than what they owe, it's really because they don't know any different. They're just doing what they think they're supposed to do, right? Like this is just what I owe. It's just the bill. So I think our job is to help navigate people to legally pay less tax. And one of the rarest things I see, Randy, I mean, it's literally, probably for you too, is somebody who comes in for the first time and they actually have a tax plan. They might have a quote-unquote financial plan, or they might have a portfolio, but to actually have a plan to reduce your tax liability over 3 to 5 years, it's a rare thing.
Yeah. So, Nick, why don't you walk through, because of our limited time, this being a coffee break, let's walk through what the House passed.
Yeah. So for our audience today, I think this is really, it's interesting. Again, we're going to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was passed by the House May 22nd of this year. Now, there are a lot of tax reforms, social spending changes, defense increases, But the reality is, this thing's not going to pass the way that it's intended to pass. The reconciliation that's going to have to happen between what the Senate wants and what the House wants, two very different things. The House has certainly a nice majority from a Republican perspective to try to push this through. However, there's a lot of moderates and there's a lot more balance in the Senate. And some of the challenges and hurdles we'll talk about in a minute with what the Senate wants, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But kind of moving on, let's talk about some of the real basics in this act. So we want to understand what the tax cuts from a context perspective. So the top 10% of earners pay over 70% of federal income taxes, as Randy was mentioning earlier. Nearly half of U.S. households pay no federal income taxes. So, there's going to be a lot of people kind of up in arms about this that really are not impacted one way or another. Tax cuts on income taxes logically benefit those who pay them. Well, we all know that, right? And so really, you're going to see a lot of people who are super, super affluent who say, absolutely, you can have this new social program. Absolutely, you can raise the taxes over here. But what we have to have a mindset of, and especially for middle America, you have to understand the really, really affluent in America are doing certain things to hedge and protect themselves from a tax perspective that middle America is not doing. They might pay hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for their tax strategies. And middle America, the problem is you're not broke enough that you're not impacted, and you're not wealthy enough that you can do something about it. So you're kind of squeezed in the middle.
That's such a great context.
So here's some of the key provisions, and I think this is also interesting. One, they want to permanently extend the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Okay. And so let's see if our slides can catch up here. We need to go one more. There we go. So these are set to expire at the end of this year. And so they want to permanently extend them. Now, I do want to make a comment about the word permanent.
That goes in your hair, right?
The thing is, I don't think our friends in Washington know what the word permanent means.
No.
Because they use permanent all the time, only for it to end, right?
It's a lot like when our kids say they're starving.
Yeah, right. For a lot of people, this was an exciting thing, tip and overtime income tax exemptions. Now, how that actually is played out, that'll be interesting. How it's enforced or how it's actually put into place, that will be interesting to see. But tip and overtime income tax exemptions, that could be really, really interesting. This one also caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't expect this. Auto loan interest deductions. Now, unfortunately, I personally, this is personal, think that buying a new car every year or every other year is not a good financial decision. That's a guaranteed loss of money. And the average American owns their home for less than 3 years. And so I'd like to thank you because I typically go in and buy that car after all the depreciation. After all that depreciation's worn off, right? But the challenge today is a lot of people need cars, but interest rates on loans are through the roof. And so I can't help but think that some of this interest deduction is to help alleviate some of the higher interest rates for people purchasing cars.
Or offset that real cost.
Help offset it, yep. No, I have not digged deep enough into this yet, but $1,000 Trump accounts per child born 2024 through 2028. I'm just going to skip. I've got nothing. I do know that if you look at a lot of demographers, I think that's how you say it, people that follow demographics and trends right now, it does appear that we do have somewhat of a population challenge, whereas a lot of people have been screaming we won't have enough population growth. I'm actually seeing a lot of the opposite. I'm seeing a lot of economists coming out and people who study demographics saying, actually, they're waving flags saying, no, we actually need to increase our birth rate. Yep. Now, this one is really interesting. The raised SALT cap. So for our audience today, SALT stands for state and local taxes. And that it's reflecting the amount of taxes, state and local taxes, that you would be able to deduct to help offset your federal income taxes. Well, the Trump tax cuts that came into play, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it limited the SALT deduction. The SALT cap was up to $10,000. So high property tax states like New Jersey, New York, California, I mean, they are screaming. They're upset. I mean, this is bad, okay, for them because they are taxed up the wazoo. That's a technical term.
That is
Aaron. Make sure you write that one
it's
down.
in the glossary.
I can't spell it, but I can say it. But the reality is this is bad, okay, for a lot of those places. And so places like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, they've really benefited because a lot of people from these higher tax states are moving to these places that have no state income taxes. And so they're getting effectively a pay raise. So people like in the government of New Jersey, I mean, they are fretting. They're really, really upset. And they're saying, hey, time out here. Like, they're tired of losing population and taxpayers. Their taxpayer base is going down.
Well, they're losing businesses too.
And businesses
are doing the same thing.
Absolutely. And so what the SALT cap is addressing here is, you know what? If you make under $500,000, we will help alleviate some of the burden of your expenses by raising the cap to $40,000. Okay, so taking it from $10,000 to $40,000, which effectively is going to help a huge amount of the population in those higher tax states.
And you can almost make a case, Nick, that some of this, where it looks like it's just benefiting a certain group of people, the reality is if that allows you to change residences and do certain economic things, it actually helps the overall economy. It's kind of a backwards way of doing it, but there is some rationale behind these things that we don't see right off. And I know I won't take any more time because we do need to move pretty quickly through the rest of this.
So we'll move forward here. So benefits for working class Americans, again, zero taxes on tips and overtime income, larger standard deductions, so those continue to remain, and that's a big one. I mean, that is huge. Can I say that?
No.
Huge? No. Okay.
No.
All right. I won't say that. But, we have to understand the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, what that brought was a doubling of our standard deduction. Yeah. So for people that were itemizing their deductions, that standard deduction was way bigger, and it gave a lot of relief to the middle class. And it looks like that's going to remain, at least from Congress's standpoint. And then, of course, credits and new savings account options for families. Here's some criticism. The deficit impact, $3.8 to $5 trillion over the next 10 years. So, Randy, we've got $1.6 million of debt per taxpayer today.
Well, for the top
roughly
10%.
For the top 10% of taxpayers. That's going to sting. I mean, that's the reality is that's going to hurt. And I'm going to pivot for a second because one of the big areas where I see this potentially getting hung up with the Senate is they want to bring that number down.
Well, not all of them, but there certainly are some key players in there that are not going to stand for this, and they're really going to make it difficult for this to pass out. So if we were making a bet today, and we don't bet, but this isn't going to go through the House as is. So I think this is one area that you're going to see some real significant challenges, but I don't know how you can do some of these things without raising the debt. So this isn't going to happen, I don't think, by July 4th. If it does, you know what? That's kind of a little early Christmas miracle.
I heard they were going to deduct firecrackers this year.
Nice.
All right. So Medicaid SNAP cuts hired with tighter eligibility. So again, in the Senate, you're going to have a lot of moderate Republicans. You're going to have a lot of Democrats who are really going to, clap back at that. And then green energy incentive rollbacks. So in the House Act, I mean, they want to roll a lot of that back. The Senate says, hey, there's so much infrastructure development and investment right now that would really, really cause more damage than good. So there's going to have to be some reconciliation around that. If we were to go kind of bottom line for clients, upper income households, they're going to see the largest dollar value relief through this proposed act. Working family benefits with some of these targeted provisions, they're going to see some relief. Policy reflects contributors to federal tax base. So again, most of what we're going to see here is really going to impact people who are in that 50% of taxpayers.
Right.
And then the last one, we're going to invite our clients, like, we got to stay informed. The final version depends on Senate negotiation, so nothing is final. This big, beautiful act is not final. A lot of people are already talking about what changes they need to make according to this. It's too soon. We really need to dig deeper. And I'd like to, I know we're trying to stay short or, stay tight on time here, but one of the things that I thought was also kind of interesting from, I don't know, a play between the House and the Senate is this estimated spending cuts. Okay, so even with that deficit increase, the House bill is proposing $1.5 trillion in cuts over 10 years. And you do have these louder voices in the Senate, and one of their big, things that they're going after is they want $2 trillion, okay? Yeah. And they don't want to budge off of that. So that's going to be something to continue to pay attention to. Medicaid reforms. So again, the House version is going to add work requirements, tighter eligibility checks, so checking on making sure you're eligible. And then you've got a lot of moderate Republicans and others that are really concerned about the rural areas and how those might be affected because they don't have the infrastructure to really enforce some of this. So bottom line here, we could spend another half an hour, 45 minutes going through some of this. There are absolutely more challenges than I think what the general public thinks between the House and the Senate in getting this bill done. I know one of the CPA experts that we follow a lot, his name's Bob Keebler, and he is, really, really an outstanding communicator. He knows his stuff. And one of the things he does believe is that maybe by the end of the summer, this thing's going to be put in place. But July 4th, that's going to be a rat race to get that done.
And I would say one other thing, you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric around this. And one of the things is that this really benefits the rich. It's rich tax cuts and all that. But in reality, you can't cut taxes on people who don't pay taxes. So this is always going to be a game of, the politicians battling back and forth to say it. The emphasis I want to say is these things are not, we can vote, we can get loud, we can be upset. But the main thing that we need to do is plan. We need to put a strategy together so we are not just victims of these things when they occur, these changes in that. And if there is a window of opportunity, it would be kind of silly not to take advantage of it. So if we're in this period of time, Nick, for maybe the next few years, whether you like the direction things are going or not, but it opens up opportunity for you to modify what you're doing to take advantage of these changes during this period of time until it changes again. That's something that you should really consider doing and working with your coaches to get a game plan together to take advantage once we see how this thing settles. And we will be keeping people informed about this.
Well, and we're going to have more coffee breaks, more coffee with the coaches. There's going to be more lunch and learns because we do want our clients to be educated. And before we kind of, bring this thing to an end, I want our clients and our audience to understand at the end of the day, winners win. Yeah. And we find a way. So it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. What can you do, regardless of who is in office, to win for you and your family? Yeah. Like, what are the strategies, no matter what happens, no matter what the new act is, no matter what the new code is? How do you win no matter what? And if you've got a trusted coach in your corner, I think you definitely enhance the probabilities of winning.
No, I agree completely. As we close, I do want to make an announcement to our clients that are listening. First of all, big idea today is making changes in according to what we know with what's going on. And as we talked about the big, beautiful bill, Mr. Bill, you're probably going to have to change your email address. That big, beautiful bill at hotmail.com may not be appropriate anymore. Now, I picked on you, Mr. Bill, if you're watching, or you'll probably hear about this later. And let me brag on you for a minute. You are an incredible part of our ambassador program. Now, if you don't know what our ambassador program here is at Yeoman's, it's for those clients that they have learned the lessons, learned the techniques, worked on being coachable, and then they've realized that they've got a friend or a family member that could also benefit from that knowledge, helping them to get optimized either in their taxes or estate planning or with their assets. And it's Yeoman's way of saying thank you. So again, if you're wanting to be a part of our ambassador program, And Yeomans does some pretty great thank yous. We enjoy doing life with our clients. This is another thing that we absolutely enjoy. The type of people that Mr. Bill has invited are people who are 3 to 5 years away from retirement, people who have already retired, but they want to reduce taxes or update their estate plan. They might be widows or widowers. They might be divorcees that are like, hey, I need a fresh financial start. People who are charitably in kind and want to give smart. And with those increased standard deductions, it takes a little bit extra finessing than it used to. So those are the people that want to come in and hang out with us. People who are selling a business or working on transition into a succession plan. Those people are the people that need to know places like Yeomans exist. And if you share us with them and they come in and consult with us, we're going to add you to our ambassador program. So anyway, again, Mr. Bill, a little bit of pick, a little bit of thank you. I want to thank everybody else for being here. I want to encourage you to stay coachable, stay connected. Make sure that you're subscribing, liking what's going on. Follow us on Instagram. Make sure, listen, we're scheduling you for those regular reviews. We want to talk to you about these things, and these conversations are easier if you already know about the big, beautiful bill. Thanks for coming in, guys.
We hope you enjoyed today's show, but you may have questions for our coaches, and they can be emailed at connect@yourretirementcoach.com. If you know someone that needs to hear this episode, we encourage you to share it. As a reminder, the content of this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as advice. On behalf of our coaches, we want to thank you for listening and for being coachable.
Yeomans Consulting Group, a registered investment advisor YouTube channel based in Marietta, Georgia. We strive to provide comprehensive wealth management services for every stage of the journey. This platform is solely for informational purposes and is not offering advisory services or sales of securities. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Comments by viewers or recognitions are no guarantee of future investment outcomes and do not ensure that a viewer will experience a higher level of performance or results. Public comments posted on this site are not selected, amended, deleted, or sorted in any way. If applicable, certain editing of personal, identifiable information and misinformation may be deleted. The opinions expressed herein are as of the date of publication and are subject to revision due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. This podcast was filmed at Podium Studios at Marietta Square. Grow your business with turnkey, professional quality podcasting, live streaming, and online events. Don't worry about editing. Don't worry about anything. Just come in and record. Learn more at thepodium.studio. Step up to the podium.